Alrighty, so CAA Football Media Day is fastly approaching, and we have one more new head coach to talk to. Griffin Della Penna here with you, and I'm also joined with UAlbany new head football coach, Jared Ambrose. Coach, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So it has been a little bit of a different timeline for you to get this kind of new role in the program. Just talk to me through the sequence of events when Coach Gattuso stepped down, and then you to again kind of get this elevated promotion.
Yeah, Coach had come to me really in late January, talking about how he might have an opportunity to come down the pipe, and he thought, a good move for the program would be to, insert me in his role. Obviously, that wasn't his decision, but he was going to advocate for me with the administration, thinking that it would be the next best move for us to make. And as he took the role at Penn State, I then sat down with our athletic director, Mark Benson. We sat at Starbucks for approximately 3 hours, just kind of went through what I believe in, the things, my core values, where I could see the program going. And then, Mark went and talked to the president, Javidan Rodriguez, and, Javidan's a big supporter of athletics here at Albany, and he was right on board. We had some interaction in a couple of the, away trips that we've had since I've been here. Him and his wife, Rosie, are phenomenal. And then, that just kind of hit the ground running. When you're one day you're a coordinator and what's about to be your off season. Greg actually announced it to the team on signing day that he was leaving, and Mark announced it to our team as well. And there were some hoops we had to jump through after that. But it's like drinking water out of a fire hose in that time of year. I don't know what the normal procedure would be to take over a program because the time in which it happened, and this is the first one I've taken over. But I do know that there's nothing you can really do to prepare for it. But the blessing in disguise for me is that I've been here for 3 seasons. So I kind of understood what was in house, who our staff was, who our support staff was, and who our roster was. So everyone here has been amazing. And it's been probably an easier transition here with everybody I work with than probably other places.
It certainly helps having that, 3 seasons underneath your belt there. How have you been able to, in that coordinator position, like you mentioned, already knowing the personnel, some of the other people on the staff, how's that really been so beneficial for you?
Well, personally, I've always prided myself on kind of going across the aisle, being an offensive guy, interacting a lot with our defensive players, kind of building them up on in every program I've been in. It's a team, it's not just a side of the ball. And, we're only going to go as far as our weakest link. So I think, with our guys in the locker room that we had there, I was a common face to a lot of guys, even though I was the coordinator. But just understanding, the strengths and weaknesses of the guys and, the belief I have had in them and things that maybe they hadn't accomplished yet. Whereas a new coach from outside comes in and, might make a snap decision on talent because he wants to make it his own program. I want this to be my program, but at the same time, I want our players to feel like I believe in them, and I do. And they believe in me, so it's been a good marriage.
Something that I feel like is sometimes overlooked is when you go from a defensive minded head coach to your perspective as an offensive minded head coach. Do you feel like there is a difference there? Because I feel like it's more hyped up than it probably actually is in the locker room.
There's differences for sure. I know in programs I've worked in, there's always, players thinking that maybe the head coach is biased because he's, from one side of the ball or the other. I've been cognizant of that, in the spring, I didn't want our defense to feel like, like I was offensive minded completely. And to be quite honest, if you asked our players, the majority of the practices in the spring, I'm going after the offense about what I didn't think was a good enough practice. So, but I would also tell the defense at the same token, like you kicked their butt today. I never wanted them walking off the field thinking that they didn't have a good practice because the offensive head coach thought the offense was bad. In spring ball, you're battling each other. So if one side of the ball, takes the victory that day, it's got to be honored. And, we did that all spring.
In 2023, you had a lot of success with this program, but you're no stranger to CAA football. What kind of step back at some of your other experiences so far in this program? And before you went there, you were at the University of Delaware and they had tremendous success there. How was that a great launching pad for yourself to go to Albany?
It was shocking to be honest. In a calendar year, we had a team that played, I think, 20 games in the same calendar year, which you can't do in college football. It doesn't matter what level. We went to the Final Four on the first end and went, I think it was 7 or 8 and 1. And then, we bounced back in the fall. We're banged up. And it definitely taught me that, perseverance is going to come in many different ways, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. You still got to deal with it, much like me taking over the situation. Regardless of the timing of the calendar in which you come into this role, you got to be able to adapt. Um, and just having been in this conference so long, I felt like I had a real good understanding for what this program was. At Albany, I had no idea how much I'd love living in New York. For where I live, it's a beautiful place. The people are amazing. It's a great area, but it definitely, my stops at Delaware and Towson now coming here has made it easier, just kind of understanding the landscape of the conference.
I'm a Buffalo, New York native, so you're right down the 90, but still, we got that, New York
You
experience together.
you understand.
Absolutely, no doubt.
Yeah.
And then before Delaware, you were with your brother at Towson for the better part of 10 seasons, had a lot of success there, specifically in that 2013 season. What was that dynamic with being with your brother on those staffs in multiple different positions?
I mean, I spent some time with him a couple weeks back home in Maryland at mom's house, but there were some times it got pretty interesting. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we did a really good job, he and we talk about this now, of compartmentalizing, the fact that we're brothers. We were both best men at each other's weddings, and then he's my boss, and we really never bled too far over those lines. He's a great coach. He's a great person. The best thing I can say about my brother as a human being, his intent is always from the greatest place in the world. Everything he intends to do for other people, for programs, for his marriage, for being a brother, everything is always from the purest, best spot. And so that made it easy to work for him. Were there times that, yeah, we butted heads? Absolutely. But I mean, that's we're also brothers, so that's nature. But it was one of those things when I talked to my father about it, he was like, you're going to get an opportunity to work with your brother for some time in this profession, and that's not common. So you better take advantage of it. And we had 10 great years, had a lot of different ADs there come through there. I think he might have hit 6 different ADs in that 10 years. I know I hit 5, and not hit them, just worked with them. But the clock kind of ran out, the sand glass was empty, and it was time for me to take a new role. And that's what, bounced me back to Delaware, which is a place I'd been before. And I also have a degree from there. So it was kind of easy for my wife and I.
You've been able to coach a lot of very special players who have went on and had careers. One, especially in the Delaware program, that sticks out when you were a student assistant was Joe Flacco. Who are some of the other players that you've been able to be around that were just so special for you?
Oh shoot, there's been a bunch. I mean, that first go at Delaware, we had a phenomenal running back named Omar Cuff, who I actually coached in the inaugural game of the Colonial Athletic Association when I was at Delaware. And I remember finishing that game and walking out to the bus with one of our coaches, and we're like, man, Omar had a good game. And you look at the stat sheet, and he had 7 touchdowns. Then there's a tight end. There were a bunch of tight ends there. When I got to Towson, obviously we had Terrence West and a number of really good quarterbacks. Jordan Dangerfield, Ty Smith, Ryan Dallaire. We put a number of guys in the NFL, and they're great people and players. And then come back to Delaware and just Troy Reeder had just walked out the door, but I coached against him, was familiar with the family, and his brother was there, and then Nolan Henderson, Dejan Lee, Thyrick Pitts, Jordan Townsend, who's my wide receiver coach now, and too many to name. You spend enough time in this conference, and you see a bunch of good ones. So I was lucky.
With the amount of talent that is in this league and your experience as a coach at multiple different stops, what's needed for the Great Danes this season and under this new leadership?
We got to stay together. We got to stay together. I've been, impressing upon our guys that, there's all dams get a crack in them at some point, and that crack just continues to manifest itself into a bigger leak, and then obviously you got problems. And they've bought into that. Our team is tighter than it's ever been since I've been here. The players, we got a good leadership council who drive every day to make sure we're reaching the standard that we want to attain. And they do a really good job measuring the fact that, if you think you've reached the standard, you haven't. If you think you hit your limit, you haven't. And to keep pushing forward. We got to play smart, error-free football. And then see how many times over and over again we can do it. We have plenty of talent here in a bunch of different places. We do a really good job here of inviting new talent and recruiting new talent, but then accepting it in the locker room, which I think is a big thing in this day and age. People are trying to figure out how to maneuver through this transfer portal world. And we've done a good job recruiting high school talent. Some of our better players the last couple of years, or prep kids that we knew maybe 10 years ago we wouldn't have had an opportunity to recruit at this level, because the bigger programs are taking a lot out of the portal. And, some of these kids, I won't name names, but I had a kid who hasn't played a snap here run a 4.32, a 4.33, and a 4.31 the other day. And he just has no stopping. And 10 years ago, that kid's going to Penn State. So, just keeping ourselves together, staying the course, knowing that times are going to be tough, but we're going to get through them, and then, playing error-free, consistent football.
Stylistically, what can fans in the state capitol expect on the field this year, and then also for everybody in the CAA?
No fear. We're going to be aggressive, maybe to a fault at times. I'm going to put the utmost belief in my players that they're in the best situation when they're on the field, and they have to go in the moment. We will not have a doubt that games are played for a reason. We're going out to Iowa, not to just show up and collect a check. They can only send 11 guys out on the field at the same time we do. So every time we get an opportunity to compete, we're going to play with absolute confidence and without fear, and we're going to be really aggressive doing it.
Well, Coach, thank you for the time. We hope that you continue to stay healthy throughout the rest of the year. And again, starting the season at Iowa, it should be a good one.
Absolutely.